Hey everyone, thanks for joining us. It's a stormy day out today. We're at Peachtree Corners Incubator, the Prototype Prime, who's a sponsor of the show. So I want to welcome you here. This is Prime Lunchtime with Brian Johnson, City Manager at Peachtree Corners. And we do this once a month, and I'm glad that you're joining us. If you have any questions, certainly if you're listening to this show live, this is a good time to be able to post any comments or questions within the live feed of the show. So feel free to do that. Otherwise, if you have comments later on, you can put it into the comments as well, but obviously we won't be able to answer any of that. But feel free if you're listening to this live to do that. I'm glad that Brian is able to come out every month with me. And today's more of a recap, I think, more of stuff that's happening that we want to catch up on. And certainly one thing that just happened the other night that I want to be able to talk about is what happened on Flippen Trail. So bear with me as we go through this. Just check and see about the live feed, since it's storming outside and we have Comcast or Xfinity that we're working with there. We should be fine. So I'm just going to dash back out for a second. Yeah, we are working it. Okay. This is what happens when I'm the engineer, producer, and host. So we're good. We're good to go. So Brian, you're back from vacation. Thank goodness. Safe
I am.
Sound, huh?
Yes.
Yeah. So Europe is a little different than America.
It has its unique things to it. That's for sure.
Yeah. I love the food out there. It's less processed, it seems, than America.
It is. Now you got to do a lot of shopping every day because there's not a lot of, there isn't a lot of food that has additives, or at least as much as here. So, but it's good.
That's a good thing. So you're back here, and all sorts of things happening. Last night was City of Peachtree Corners City Council meeting. But yesterday, because of the storm lately, there was a big thing at Flippen Trail, right?
There was. So we knew that there was potentially going to be a problem there anyway. As you remember, we took over the stormwater program here in Peachtree Corners starting January 1.
Yeah. Prior
to that, of course, Gwinnett County had implemented stormwater user fees, 11, 12 years ago. Mm-hmm. And when the city became a city, it had just told Gwinnett County, hey, instead of us keeping the revenue from those fees now that we're a city, we're just going to let you handle it all. Right. Which is fine, but over a number of years, there were some instances where mayor and council kind of felt like the money generated from that revenue stream was not going to things that they felt were as important. And Gwinnett County, being the largest county government in the state, is a pretty big bureaucracy, so things move even slower there than they do here.
Yeah.
So the decision was made in the interest of just having better, more say and being more efficient, is to bring it in-house. So we're not outsourcing it to Gwinnett County anymore.
City controls everything now.
Correct. And so, now there's no new fee. It's still the stormwater user fee revenue, but we are no longer giving it to Gwinnett County to do work for us. We're doing it ourselves. So when we started that in January, my Public Works Department started a verification of the system's needs. Mm-hmm. And Gwinnett County had a list of locations in the city that had some need for attention. Right. Whether there was some repairs that needed to be made, some upsizing, some maintenance or whatever. And so they have a good list. We had a great starting point, but we were wanting to verify that it is in fact what we want and everything. And in the course of that, we discovered Flippen Trail culvert had some issues. Now, Gwinnett County knew that a number of years ago because they had started a process in which they were going to, upgrade that thing, that whole culvert. Mm-hmm. to the point where they had started the design, and for some reason, and we're hearing it was because they ran into property acquisition issues. They just stopped. So when we discovered it, it needed some attention. So Public Works Department had already gotten on board, had already gotten the design underway, and actually bid the project out a little over a month ago.
Oh, wow.
So we had, yes, proactively, because we knew we needed to do something.
Yeah.
Now, we ended up, so we got the bid responses, and the bid was to replace the whole thing. So we knew we were asking, but it came in just because there's a lot of work. The low bid was about $900,000.
And that's
a lot of money.
Replace the whole thing. Replace what?
So there are, I believe it's 4 or maybe it's 3. It's 3 very large pipes underneath the road that feed, because Flippen is an elevated road on each side, and so there are 3 large. I mean, you're probably talking 40 to 60-inch pipes next to each other. So a trio of pipes that are corrugated metal.
You sent me that picture of the.
And then it has masonry around it, kind of arched to kind of hold it in place, and it's what allows water to get from one side of that elevated road to the next.
Right.
And it was starting to, some of the masonry was starting to kind of fail, and we knew we needed to do something. So we bid the thing out, and it came in as, we bid it out to replace them all, which is you have to remove all of the road above it, remove those 3 pipes, put new ones back in, bigger than these, and then put the road back in, compact it, resurface it, the whole thing. And so we did, and when it came back at $900,000, we thought, man, there might be some value engineering we can do to not, to maybe, and we were in that process. When 2 nights ago we had a very nasty storm here, and we got a lot of rain and wind in a short period of time, and it just overwhelmed the pipes. And at the back end on the picture you just saw, that water pulled the masonry away, and then the road collapsed.
Yeah, the picture I just showed on Facebook Live, and I'll post it on the website too, was the sinkhole. Essentially, the above the top part of the picture was where the top of the road was. I'll put it back on the Facebook thing, but explain what we're looking at.
And so, what that is those 3 pipes and the masonry around it having been pulled away by the water. And so because of that, it doesn't have the protection above the pipes, and it started to cave in. And you look at the top of that, you can see the hedge that's supposed to be straight across, and it's got a nice little dip. And I just sent you the other one. That's the view from above on the top of the road, which is above, looking down that hedge, and you can see how it dips and how it's giving way. And so, yeah, very dangerous situation. So when we discovered it yesterday morning, went out, and we were like, okay, this is no longer just something we need to do. It needs to be done immediately. We looked at the integrity of it, and we had to close the entire road. So last night, council authorized me to execute that emergency repair contract.
How long is that going to take now?
Well, we executed it today and informed the contractor we need them to get started right away. Yeah. So the beauty here is, given that we control this, we're able to move fast.
Yeah, that's really fast.
I mean, actually. So we're gonna challenge the contractor to get this thing done as soon as
Any idea?
I don't. I mean, it'll probably be a couple months. I mean, if you think about it, you got to go in and excavate all of that, all the way down to the stream bed, and then you got to bring in pipe. Put it in there, get that all stabilized. Then you got to build around it so that it's got a stable, roof over the pipes.
Do you need to excavate further to make sure the rest of those pipes are good?
No, none of those pipes are good. You got to. They're also corrugated metal, and so those rust. I mean, so no, it's got to be replaced. The pipes probably be, and then once you put those in, you got to stabilize over top of it because you're going to have weight of vehicles and road. Then you build up to the same level as current Flippen Trail. Then you got to resurface it, tie it in.
Yeah, I can see how that could take a couple of months.
And so it'll probably take a couple of months. Now, again, we're going to challenge, them to do it quick. Now, the beauty here, thankfully, is Flippen Trail is not a dead-end road. You can get to it from multiple directions. So there's nobody stuck back there. There's nobody doesn't have access to their house. Now, they may not have multiple ingress, egress points like they did before.
Well, that's fortunate. You're right, because I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, I mean, some of these places it could have happened, and you have no way in or out, and or you got to do temporary bridges while you do the permanent one, and it can get really, really expensive. So, in this case, if we had not controlled it, it could have easily been a couple months before you even had a contractor.
Yeah, so the timing is actually fortunate.
We've got a design. We have a design that to fix this, and it had already been bid out.
Just how fortunate can that go?
Right. I mean, outside of the misfortune of it collapsing in the first place, but yes, we are in an enviable position. So, good thing is that, and we have the stormwater, user fee revenue to pay for it. So it doesn't come out of any other fund. It comes out of the fund that's collected for the sole purpose of drainage, maintenance, and repair.
Right. Well, good thing the city's on top of that, and that you guys already had all that material ready to go, the bid and everything. So we had a city council meeting last night, and I think we'll get to that. I think one of the other topics was the waste management. The bid got won, and it's supposed to start July 1st.
Well, January 1 is when the service will change.
The service will change.
Right.
All right. So there's been some confusion on something, so let's see if we can.
There has. So, last council meeting prior to this, council authorized me to execute the contract with Waste Management. And then after that was done, the mayor in the newsletter spoke a little bit to the fact that we did make this change and it's going to happen January 1st. And so in his newsletter, he had some information, and then as oftentimes is the case, and you don't blame, but the AJC picked up his newsletter and the information. Of course, they have space requirements, so they have to take his newsletter, which is not an all, totally exhaustive, all-encompassing source in and of itself. He's just trying to give the highlights and kind of tell people, look, in 6 months or so on January 1, you're going to have a change. And this is generally what it looks like, more to follow. Right. The AJC picked it up, and I think some others. But, of course, the heading is, the solid waste fees are going to increase. Of course, everybody gets everybody's attention. Yeah. And then the AJC and some of these other ones had to condense even the mayor's newsletter even more. So there's a lot of good information that was left out. And as you can imagine, that created a bunch of people who were like, and the rumor started. Right. And, some of those is, so I just want to be clear on a couple of things is, all right, so the current.
We've had the same contract for 5 years.
We have. Well, you actually had it for about 3 years before that, because the current waste hauler, Waste Pro, had a contract for unincorporated Gwinnett County. Right. They were one of the three that had a contract to unincorporated Gwinnett. And when the city was created, Waste Pro already did this area. They bid on the contract. They got it, and they actually decreased the monthly rate. Okay. So for the last 8-ish years, there's not only not been any increase at all, there was actually a decrease 5 years ago from what it was prior to that. Okay. So for 8 years, people, now that's great. Right. The downside, of course, is, no one would refute the fact that, inflation exists. Cost of doing things go up every year, sometimes marginal enough they don't need to do anything. But so there was an increase coming at some point anyway. We knew that. But our contract expired at the end of this year, so we rebid it out. And we got 4 responses. Okay. 4 respondents, 4 companies submitted a response to our bid. One of them is our current waste hauler. Right. So they bid on it. And the couple things that were in common with all of them, first and foremost, is the fees that were associated with this new service, everybody's went up. Waste Management, which got the contract, was actually the lowest of the four, and that included our current waste hauler. So there was no, we should have just stayed with our current one. Right. That option did not exist.
So of the four that can do this type of work, because it takes a certain type of company to be able to do this, and they're not like a dozen or 2 dozen of them. Of the four, that was the lowest one?
Yes, Waste Management by far was the lowest one, by like more than $1 a month. So it wasn't even close. Mm-hmm. So Waste Management was the lowest. So that was good, but that was important because people were like, we should have stayed with. Well, Waste Pro was going to have to go up too. Mm-hmm. Cost of doing things are. Sure. Second thing is all of the respondents did not propose picking up solid waste in one day.
Okay.
And there are some people who are like, I heard they're going to go to 5-day a week pickup. Mm-hmm. They're going to divide the city up into 5 zones. Mm-hmm. And so the entire city will not be picked up in one day. And it really came down to the fact that no waste hauler really can. Part of the problem we're having right now, there's a consistently missed pickups, despite our, Waste Pro really trying to do what they can to pick it up, but it's just too many in one day. And if there's any little blip in anything, they got a truck that goes down for a little while, or driver doesn't show up or is late, or there's storms and they can't do anything, and then they're having to, and they have multiple trucks too, because you got one for solid waste, you got a different one for recycling, and then a different one for the yard waste. And so any of those trucks, and then you're going to have missed pickups. It's just you can't do it. Mm-hmm. So none of the options were for one day. So those who are like, my day might change. So we haven't decided who still gets Monday yet. 20% of the city will stay on Monday.
But it will be a 5-day a week.
It will.
pickup.
It will.
Okay.
So, but again, the beauty there is definitely going to be that entire zone will be picked up that day. Okay. Because they don't have a service area that requires them to. Mm-hmm. So that was the second thing, that all of them were the same. And the third one is nobody had glass as an eligible recyclable item.
Even though now glass gets picked up.
As a current contract, glass can get picked up with the other recycling.
Right.
The problem is, and even Waste Pro under the current contract had wanted to stop doing it, because nobody is taking glass commingled with the other eligible recycled material anymore, because glass has too high of a risk of contaminating the rest of the recycling. Mm-hmm. When it breaks, it's almost impossible to get the glass pieces out. If you have other materials that gets in the glass, it ultimately doesn't get cleaned well enough to recycle. And then a good example of how broken glass contaminates the rest of it is like cardboard. If you have glass shards in the cardboard, you can't, get the cardboard and recycle it into other materials because it's got those little glass shards in it. Mm-hmm. So they have to take the entire recycling, mix and throw it in regular household because glass contaminates it. So all the waste haulers are saying no more glass commingled.
Interesting.
So four of them.
They're not suggesting to pre-sort it before they get it, like glass, cardboard, and everything else.
No, these are all single stream, which means all of the list of eligible material to go recycle gets thrown in one container.
Right.
Versus, because, you could set it up to where you could have, 10 different containers.
I sort my cardboard separate. I actually tie that cardboard separate from the rest of the bin stuff. But I noticed that a lot of people don't do that.
No, and you don't have to, as long as it doesn't get. So now what the waste haulers, and I know Waste Management said is, look, we just like all of them, we don't want glass in the single stream, but we are going to set up a drop-off. They're going to set up 2 drop-off locations.
Right, I saw that, okay.
And yet to be determined. We want to get it within the city limits, yes. So you will be able to do that, but then all the rest of the recycling can be thrown into the same one. Cardboard, paper,
That
tin
that's going to be
cans,
interesting
aluminum.
because I can't imagine people. They're going to probably. So what if they don't recycle the glass? What if
They just throw it in with the regular household,
regular garbage?
So
it's really up to the individual whether they want to recycle and go that extra step.
That's
to
correct.
Drop it off.
That's correct. And all 4 of the respondents were the same on that.
Okay.
So that's important because there was, you were hearing the whole, well, why don't we just stay with the same one? So there's those 3 areas I just talked about:
Right.
price, multiple days of the week pickup, and glass recycling not being part of single stream. All of them were the same.
It's interesting that all of them bid that way. All 4 of them decided to.
Well, it's because the way the industry's going. I mean, again, so if on not only is it too big, are we too big to pick up in one day, but if you were a waste hauler, you were Acme Solid Waste, and you wanted to bid on this, how could you? And you know that you've got to buy trucks to service the city.
Sure.
If you picked up the city in one day, what are you doing with the trucks the other 4 days of the week?
Yeah, that's a tough one. Yeah, maybe
You're not.
Maybe bid on a different city, but
I mean, they all have contracts, but if they're not open,
yeah.
I mean, if there's no other city to bid on,
So they can.
now that's how Waste Pro did it up to now.
Right.
Is they have unincorporated, a third of unincorporated counties. So they pick us up on Mondays, and then Tuesday through Friday, they're out in unincorporated Gwinnett doing. But even their initial bid was for 5-day-a-week pickup. So that was the same. Now, Waste Management was, so we went through the process. I had a committee that evaluated the responses, graded it, and then we interviewed them. And Waste Management, aside from the fact that they were the cheapest per month cost, was awarded the highest score because of a number of reasons. All right, so they agreed to buy all brand new compressed natural gas trucks, so, which are the quietest trucks that they've got, and so they're going to do that. They have they're the world's largest solid waste provider.
They are.
They have a very aggressive and robust maintenance program, which when you combine that with brand new trucks, and by the way, brand new trucks that only work Peachtree Corners. They are never going to be outside of our corporate limits working another job. They're assigned here. Okay. When you combine that fact with the fact they'll be new in their maintenance program, I believe that the hydraulic fluid issue will not be an issue anymore. Okay. They have a very strong digital presence and an electronic presence. And that's important because all of the cans are going to be tagged to where we will know, they will know, and us as their partner will be able to track whether your can got tipped at a certain time or whether it got missed. We know where the trucks are at any time. They're going to give us access to the tracker on knowing where their trucks are at any time.
See them.
That's correct. GPS. So if somebody's like, the truck hasn't been here, we'll be able to know, or my can never got tipped, we'll be able to know that.
Now, is it just tipped, or will they even have a weight on that?
They might, actually. I don't know. But I do know that they'll know if it gets tipped.
Okay.
They and they're giving us access to that, so that'll be great. And they're also putting their app inside of our city app.
Oh,
so you'll be able to request additional,
big
bulk pickup, make put in a claim for something, a request for whatever. I mean, through our app, so you don't have to actually go somewhere else. So that'll be, and so that was another benefit. And it's really important too because this is a unique contract in that we're going to an exclusive residential and commercial franchising.
That was the other component.
And that helped keep the cost down because whoever got it knew that they were getting not only the residential side but also all the commercial.
And in short, since we've covered that before, the commercial side comes on as contracts get grandfathered out.
Right. So currently we have 9 waste haulers that provide service in the city for commercial accounts. So if you had a commercial, you owned Acme Widget Company, you could call any of the 9 and say, what's your rates and whatever. Right. We're going to where it's only going to be one through the city. So we're actually the solid waste provider. We just outsource it to and award a single franchisee. So Waste Management when they become on January 1 the exclusive franchise holder, at that point, no new contracts or no extension of existing contracts can happen outside of Waste Management.
So,
but if you have an existing contract,
you'll know that. How would you know that?
Okay, so if you have an existing contract,
Right.
you can let that play out if you want.
Right.
But for businesses to get their business license renewed,
okay.
we need
that's where you see the
yes,
validation.
and so that's where they have to tell us where contract if they don't have it with Waste Management.
Right.
And so ultimately, all of them now. Anybody can leave their current hauler on their own volition. If Waste Management's rates are more competitive, and Waste Management feels like they're going to be able to go out and convince people to voluntarily transition over to them anyway.
Okay, so
we're talking about the city making them. We can't and are not going to make anybody transition to Waste Management on the commercial side immediately.
Right.
We're
but
just not going to let them renew with anybody else or extend with anybody else. We let their contract at the time
So if
expire.
it goes a year, 2 years, 3 years, they just keep going until it's expired. Okay.
And so that's kind of where we're at. A couple other things of note.
Will the basket size be the same, or is it getting
smaller?
No,
no, it's not. So the household container is the same 96-gallon wheeled.
Okay.
But the recycling container is not. It's getting bigger. It's a 64-gallon wheeled container. So it's a smaller version of what we currently have as far as the wheel one, but it has a lid and it's wheeled.
Cool. Okay.
So, yes, you can get more in it, and you don't have to try to carry it. Or I've had run out into the street and pick up, paper that's flying away if it's too windy because there's no current lid on our blue container.
That's funny because I went out to Home Depot and I bought my own roll-away because I was like, I had 2 buckets. And I was like, what's the point? And we got one roll-away, and they keep taking it. So it's worked out fine for that.
Yes. So we're –
Go ahead.
Well, so, that's important. Couple other things that are of value. Going to commercial and residential together means that we're going to be able to stop the commercial waste haulers from violating our noise ordinance and going out and tipping dumpsters before 7 a.m.
You know exactly when they're going to be wherever they are.
Well, not only that, we have one point of contact. So it's right now we get calls. But we don't know. We'll be like, well, which truck? I don't know. Oftentimes they can't see them.
Right.
It's like over a fence or whatever, so they don't know. And that's one of 9 waste haulers, so we don't know who to contact. We also, in some cases, don't know who's using what, like at the Forum. Trader Joe's uses a different waste hauler than Belk, which uses a different waste hauler than the management company that does most of the small shop. I mean, so it's all over the place. And we'll be able to prevent that because – one point of contact, there's no doubt it would be their trucks, and we know where they're at.
Right.
So I know there's some people who are going to be like, finally, I don't have to listen. Because some of them, they try to get a head start, and they get out there, and we have caught them at 4:35 in the morning.
Really?
And dumpster tipping is not quiet.
It's not, no.
So that's another benefit that we'll get, the transfer facility. Yeah. That the trash is taken to first before it gets sent to its final resting place is here in Peachtree Corners.
Okay. Was it here before? No.
Yeah, it's out. No, it's just down the what would that be? The west side of PIB, or excuse me, the east side of PIB near Mechanicsville.
Yeah. Oh yes. Okay, near close to Buford Highway. Yeah.
And so that they control it. So Waste Management owns that. Okay. The other waste haulers pay them to take that, and now they own it. So in instances like when we had the storm and all the trees, came down last year, or I guess it was the tropical storm when it hit us, we had to pile up all of the debris actually in the very back upper parking lot behind what's now currently City Hall because we didn't have anywhere to put it. Waste Management, when we're with them, they have that transfer facility that we can go and do, use that to store it. So there's a lot of different advantages to doing this, but, the bottom line is we had to rebid it. Our current contract expired. Waste Management won it both on price and with their other,
And quite frankly, if anything, yes, I'm used to putting out garbage on Sunday night, but putting it out on Monday night or Tuesday night or Wednesday night. I don't see a problem with that. Now, of course, if you're partying a lot or, you have family over the weekend, that garbage is going to wait until next Friday to be picked up. That I could see some issues there, but
there are always those times. I've had unique, instances like Christmas.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Where you just have extra boxes or extra whatever, and you can't quite get it all or whatever.
Right.
And
but Christmas isn't always on the weekend. That's the thing. Christmas goes on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
And so there could be times where somebody's like, but it's. I would rather do that than be constantly crossing my fingers, hoping that they'll be able to pick it all up on that one day.
Yeah, no, I get that.
So,
and you know what? I think once people get used to it, it'll be easy, because I don't think anyone overflows just on Monday morning. I think if it's going to happen, it happens whenever.
Your kind of battle rhythm at home tends to adjust to when it is.
I think so.
I mean, we push off things until Friday. We kind of have a little routine of getting certain trash and making it so that you can get it out Sunday night for Monday pickup. If ours is picked up Wednesday, we'll do that on Tuesday night and get it, and so we'll adjust.
Yeah, I think people can do that within the 7-week period and get used to things. I think that's usually the take on
I think so too.
What's going on with Town Center? What's the new stuff that's going on? Is the 13 restaurants? It's always been the same amount, right?
Same amount.
Okay. Different shifting.
Sometimes they do shift.
Yeah. So what's going on there new? What can we expect? Where's the parking lot?
Well, I mean, the buildings themselves, with the exception of the 2 out parcels, which are the 2 pads that would be in between 141 and the parking deck.
Right.
Because you really won't be able to see the parking deck like you currently see it soon, because there'll be 2 buildings in front of it.
Now, 2 buildings in front of it are going to be. Is that?
We don't know yet.
Okay.
There's a couple of them that are close, but in the economic development world, until the fat lady singing, so to speak, you don't want to. So that one, they're not locked in ink yet.
And those are 2 separate parcels, so it'll be 2 separate buildings, just like Black Walnut.
Correct.
Right.
That's like an out parcel. I mean, there. What was the Mexican restaurant that was supposed to go there initially and fell through, and then Jim and Nick's they were thinking about doing it, and those are some of the ones. But it's just a standalone, like you said, Black Walnut. There's 2 of them between 141, 2 of those pads to put a building.
Right. Okay.
That hasn't been decided. The rest of it, they've been fluid, but the buildings themselves are pretty. I mean, they've done pretty well with as much rain as we've gotten to stay pretty close to on track.
Okay.
The buildings. Now, what's a little bit behind is the town green area. The grading necessary for that site is behind, because that's still weather dependent completely. These buildings, oftentimes, once you get them weatherized, the roof on it, you can then be working on it even though it's raining. And so we're probably about 2 months behind on the town green from weather. Okay. So we were hoping to have the town green done middle of December. It's probably going to be, February, March.
Probably.
Which spring, we wouldn't have really done much
I was going to say,
in January or February anyway. And so it really hasn't affected anything. But, it's just, it is what it is. So.
And Cine Bistro, we discussed that, I think, at another point. It's not Cine Bistro anymore, or they were purchased by a different company?
Well, they were purchased by one of the 3 big owners of, like Regal Cinemas is one. I think AMC is another. Could have been one of them. And there's a third, Carmike or whatever. They got bought out by one of them.
Okay. So
I don't know if it's going to be called Cine Bistro. I want to say, if I remember, that the company that bought them out has another name for their boutique. Okay.
Similar.
It's going to same
restaurant.
exact as. See, those plans were already approved. That construction was underway when this purchase went through.
So the site plan, everything.
That doesn't change. No, it's still got the little brew pub in there, and the restaurant, and stadium seating, and the Lazy Boy recliner, and all that kind of stuff.
And it still is. It's after 6 p.m. or something. No kids under 13 or something. I think it was.
I believe so.
Okay. All right. So that's all cool. What about the What about the apartments, the 169 unit apartment, along with the, if it's still the Indigo Hotel, the boutique hotel?
Well, I mean,
Is that still going, or
it is.
have they done anything since our last?
No, I mean, but remember, we hear these things. Fiserv is going to be another one. These things go through. There's a lot of visibility, conversation, because they need the city to approve something, a rezoning, a special use permit, a site plan, whatever. Yeah. And they can't do much until they get that approval. Once they do, then they got to go back and they got to engage the architects and the engineers, and there's lots of work on paper. Okay. Environmental stuff and geotechnical reports and everything. And so it's going to be a year from when those things were approved at best before you're going to see anything, because right now they're all with their consultants and and then that's one part. Then they're lining up financing on the other, and I mean, so you're not going to see anything for a while.
And the same deal with Fiserv. I guess the firm of Fiserv property with the 900 unit adult community.
Correct.
They got approved, but it'll be.
Could be a year or two on that one, because that's a really big. Okay. But yeah, I mean, so they're moving. I mean, we get. Every now and then some evidence that there's, activity still going on. A consultant will call up the city or email and say, I'm working on behalf of Roberts Properties or, East Jones Bridge LLC about that parcel. Can you give us this? So we know that there are things going on, but until they're needing a land disturbing activity permit, they don't need us for a while. So. Okay.
What about the roundabout at Medlock and Peachtree Corners Circle? Where are we with that? I know you're still acquiring land, or are you done with that?
We've acquired most. We are left with the most difficult.
Still one more piece?
Two more.
Two more pieces.
We've had to. One is a company out of California, I believe, and one is a local. And
two different corners of the four corners?
And we just had to kind of take it to the next level
which is?
Well, we had to inform them that they need to sell us the parcel, or we're going to
condemn the property.
We're going to have a judge tell them that they need to sell us the parcel. Right. So,
okay. Well, that's how that goes. Condemnation with market value and.
Well, when you have 300% difference in the appraised value and what they want.
Yes, that's right, to make money on it.
Make money, they're trying to buy a small Caribbean island for, what they, I mean, so, and that's off of the appraised value, in which we never offer just appraised. It's always appraised plus a certain percent, like 125% of appraised value or something. But, when they're like 300-400% of appraised value, you're kind of like, okay. We can't be irresponsible with public funds by giving you that.
Yeah, I would think that would really.
In fact, we've even redesigned it since by backing off certain things so that we're not unnecessarily taking property. Okay. Well,
you can't blame them for wanting more money, I guess. What about what I'm hearing? I saw on Nextdoor, someone was saying about food court going into maybe the Earthfare, and I'm like, food court. So what's going on there? Anything new there? That someone was asking, like, what type of food court would make sense to go there?
I saw that too, but here's the problem. Of course, this is why economic development is such a fickle thing. So I saw some of that too, but think about if we did a food court, and I believe it's, what do they call it down in Ponce City Market, Grog Street, or something like that.
Yeah. That's a really nice setup.
It is, but somebody was throwing that out and saying do that, which would be fine, cool. But what are you doing? You're bringing more food establishments in an area that already has a lot and is getting 13 more. Yeah. So if you were coming into the town center, or you already had a food establishment near there, would you want that to happen? No. Yeah. So we don't want to, cannibalize anything that we currently have. And two, the market's not there. So if you were looking to open some sort of a food establishment, would you want to go to where there's already that many?
Well, I'm okay. I'm not a restaurateur, let's say, but I think I know well enough that to hide a food court inside of Earthfare that someone has to make a point of going to, as opposed to the town center and walking around there. I just don't see that, especially that large. That'd have to be split up. I think that building then to accommodate, unless you have.
Well, the Earthfare space is only 23,000 square feet. That's not that big.
No, but how many food court type? I've been to like North Point Mall, and their food court has what? 20,
yeah, I mean, that may be, that may be, but
what would you put there?
Again, it's not part of something else like a mall food court. You're already walking past it.
That's my point. It's not. There's nothing in there but a food thing. Food choices, which
right. But you got a bunch of other ones that are right there at the town center, and then a bunch that are at the Forum.
Yeah, and it's not Ponce Market. I mean, Ponce Market. I've been there, and that building is a great-looking building. It's an old warehouse or
Sears Roebuck.
Sears Roebuck, and it's really nice. I mean, and they have other shops there and stuff. It's a whole different feel. I don't think you get that.
It's also 2 stories to that thing,
right.
In that area, and
you can't get that same feel from that
from
building.
a former what was it, Staples or Office Max, and then a former Earthfare. I mean, no. Now, the thought behind, that would be kind of cool to create that. I got it. But then you get into the reality of the situation is none of the current restaurants or food vendors are going to want it.
Right.
2, it may end up hurting them and they go out of business because you have too much. And then 3, who are you going to get to want to go into a market that's pretty saturated when you include the new town center stuff already? Mm-hmm. So, I got the thought behind it, but that's the reality of the situation. Yeah. So, what goes in there, I don't know.
I'd almost think, quite frankly, the way I look at that is that, and I don't. Again, I'm just looking at the look of the place. It's an old look. I'm almost thinking that whole front, the whole frontage of that piece, has to be sort of almost removed, if you will, and like a more modern, contemporary glass structure front to that. I mean, you could probably add even another story to that part of the building, I bet. I don't know if that's a possibility, but, I could see if someone wanted to do that. I mean, would that be possible? They could technically apply for development where they can add a story or 2 on top of that structure.
Oh, sure. I mean, that wouldn't make it violate our height ordinance. Yeah. And, if you have enough money and will, you can do whatever you want. I mean, they could cut that section out and
anything's possible.
Yeah, right? So I don't know what's going to go, but I know that some sort of a food court type of thing is probably not going to.
The same way I keep thinking, if someone decides they want to do a flea market there and they get the lux or the rent to do it, I don't think that's would work, right? We were talking about also the autonomous vehicle. I mean, there's a lot more. We were talking about the tip of the iceberg before. So tell me what's going on there.
Yeah, so, when I was tasked with, implementing this, at the time you think of autonomous vehicle as, okay, and the test track, the lane. So it was a combination of the 2. Mm-hmm. You think, okay, we're going to design a lane that's dedicated to this vehicle. We're going to go out and bid a vehicle, and then we're going to advertise that it's kind of available for the, advanced vehicle ecosystem out there, the companies that are in this, that they can come out and use or whatever. So you think about that, and, you think, okay, that's an entire, series of activities and all the thought behind it. So it's kind of like, in my opinion, like an iceberg where you look at it, if you're on the surface of the water, you have the iceberg you can see. Most of the time, that's only like 20% of the size because 80% is you can't see yet. Right. You just keep digging. And the more I've dug into this, the more I realize that this environment is almost, mind-boggling how big it is. So, for instance, we started, thinking that, okay, if we are going to allow, this is going to be used as an economic development activity, and we want people to come in and use this resource to, get into this market that will use an existing road,
Right.
which every city has. So it'll be kind of, and we'll just separate the road a little bit, do a few things, and then make the car really smart so that people can come in and change out components of the car.
Uh-huh.
As we got into it, we found out that it may be the opposite. We may need to switch and make the road smarter and the car dumber. And the experts are saying, look, if the car's really, really smart on its own, meaning it is smart enough it theoretically could operate on any road without any.
Mm-hmm.
But then you want to use that same vehicle to change out components. Mm-hmm. And think about it, let's say the radar of that car, you're wanting to test a new radar on that car.
Right.
Well, if the car's eyes are the radar and you're testing it out and there could be glitches or whatever, what happens if it's not working right? The track is dumb, so it can't help it out. They're saying maybe you need to add and make the track smarter so that if you're testing something, you can turn on the intelligence of the track and it can guide the car as you're changing things out on the car.
Okay.
And so that starts to make sense. So then you're like, okay, what does it mean to make the track smart?
Yeah.
Is it magnetic strips in the street? Is it, some sort of a device on the light poles? What is it?
Yeah.
And there's various ways to do it. Then you start getting into, okay, and you start talking about, well, what's your ultimate goal? And, we were like, all right, well, we're talking about an autonomous vehicle to move people around.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the experts are saying, why not goods? And, you're like, well, why not? And you come to find out that research into or the interest in moving goods far exceeds the research and demand on moving people.
Look at Tesla and their big transport
Waymo.
vehicle.
And so we're finding that, having vehicles that are autonomous and can deliver goods is a much bigger market with Amazon and all that kind of stuff. That's a bigger market than the people moving. So that's one.
That's interesting. Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Then when you get into that, they're talking about, well, there's two aspects of moving goods. You've got the car or truck on a road, but then you've got the smaller vehicle that may be on a sidewalk, going to a location and actually putting packages into maybe a special mailbox that we all have or whatever. So you're talking about maybe our track being for both the vehicle and the sidewalk on that side of the road being used for testing on small autonomous, like mail delivery bots. And I mean, it's just every time I scratch it, there's just more, and I'm just like, holy cow.
Now we can see how the post office can actually get autonomous vehicles delivering their mail, because that would be easy because everyone has a mailbox and recognize it, drop the mail in there, and they would cut their cost phenomenally and still be able to deliver mail to every house in the country.
Right. And so, you're just getting into this. So you're just kind of like, okay, so, right now there's a lot of work, a lot of communication, but it tends to be on what is the best design with the information we know, the best design for our corridor such that we can use it as there's also, do you want multiple cars operating at the same time? Because if so, then we may need to put some more spurs for a car to get off the main lane if another one's coming down being tested, so that they, you can get off, kind of like we have with UPS, FedEx, little spur right now. Do another one or two so that you can have multiple cars operating at the same time.
No, you're still thinking Technology Park. You're still thinking that road that was originally thought of?
Yes, that'll still be the phase one that we'll definitely be doing.
Okay.
But, you could have some kind of turnout, some spurs off of there. And,
So what would that mean? Going into the right-of-way, going into parking?
No, off into the shoulder. So if you're on Technology Parkway right now, there is a little turnoff, a little spur that you can pull off to the right, to the shoulder.
Right.
And there's a FedEx, a UPS, and a U.S. Postal Service drop.
Right.
The thought is we create one or two more of those so that if one vehicle was going this way and another one is coming the other way, they can turn off so that the other one can go by and then it can get on. So you can have multiple vehicles going, which, just them interacting with each other is research and development in and of itself, because autonomous vehicles have got to be able to talk to other autonomous vehicles.
And that makes sense, because even at the beginning I was wondering, I think it was $300,000 for the projected cost of one autonomous vehicle.
Potentially 250, yeah, I mean, potentially.
And I think it's just one of them. How many people, how many companies can actually work with that one vehicle? But to allow multiple vehicles actually makes more sense to me.
And we're also finding as much interest in companies that already have their own vehicle, but they want to come bring their vehicle out here.
There you go.
Then to use ours. We have some that don't, and they need a vehicle to test their component.
But
we have as much
road makes sense.
So you could turn on and off the technology of the road to keep the cars, to assist in the development or in the research of the cars and the technology.
Interesting. I saw I think it was M Planet. It's been advertising a lot lately in some of the podcasts I listen to. M Planet is really about Michigan and their smart city initiatives and how they're pushing. Makes sense, because Michigan cars, they're pushing autonomous vehicles and come to our city and use our autonomous vehicle roads that they're setting up also to be able to work your research on and doing stuff. So
yes, and now it's interesting. University of Michigan has one of the best autonomous vehicle testing environments. But we've talked about this before, but their testing environment is sanitized and it's isolated from interacting with human-driven automobiles.
Right.
And so that can be, so you can only test to a certain level there before you need to kind of go
move it along. Yeah.
And there are some examples of the other end of the spectrum where you've got a very complicated but very highly evolved technology environment in which cities are looking to integrate everything together. Traffic signals, pedestrians, human-driven automobiles, autonomous vehicles, all together in North Avenue in downtown Atlanta is a good example of that.
Right.
That corridor has got a lot of technology going in it. Traffic signals, talking with people's phones, it's pretty cool. Yeah. It is extremely complicated, and it'll take a long time and to get that up, and for you to test things that are not fully functional in there is probably so. There's this niche in the R&D environment for autonomous vehicles that doesn't really exist, and that's kind of the in between the two extremes. Not an isolated, sanitized environment, but yet not too complicated. And we think we have one here in that the lane the car is going on is isolated to just the autonomous vehicle. But there are 9 points in which it would interact with a human-driven automobile on 9 parking lots that have ingress, egress that will intersect, and then 3 intersections themselves. So it's kind of the one step into the interacting with the human element, but not as complicated as North Avenue. So there's some companies that are liking that. They're like, you're a great next step after we've tested in the isolated environment like, University of Michigan has. You're a great next step. So we're hoping to capitalize on that.
Cool. So when do you so actually Prototype Prime, who's a sponsor of this podcast because of the studio that we're using at Prototype Prime, they're part of this too, right? So in
they
short,
have.
How do they fit in?
So Prototype Prime has an advanced vehicle accelerator function, and that is a part of Prototype Prime. Job is to link up this environment we're creating with those in the industry that are wanting to test or whatever, and so their job is to kind of play matchmaker.
Right.
And so that's where their involvement is going out and saying, hey, you're in this environment, why don't you come over? And what we're trying to figure out now is the best way to partner per se. I mean, are we going to sell time on the track, or is it going to be a partnership where somebody gets to do it and then they get so much access, or even in some cases control of the use of it if they buy into. I mean, so we're kind of figuring it out right now, but that's why that whole iceberg analogy to me is every time I turn around, it's just this new aspect that I'm like, and there's not a lot of experience out there in this environment for me to look
like
to.
The wild,
we're
wild
all
west,
we're all kind of feeling our way in the dark a little bit. So
it's going to start moving fast at some point. There's always that tipping point where all of a sudden something breaks out and everything starts moving really fast. So I could see that. We've covered a lot, I think, today, and we're going to be coming back again next month. I'm sure there's going to be a lot more stuff going on. I think anything other new?
No, I think that's. I mean, that's enough for one day.
So we're here with Brian Johnson, City Manager of Peachtree Corners, and we do this once a month as Prime Lunchtime. Glad you guys have been able to join us. And if you have any questions for future meetings of this, let me know. We are planning a nice, a good show for the Ed Hour for the third Thursday of July. So we have something coming up just before school starts, and we're planning out the rest of the fall with that, with Alan Kaplan, who's my co-host on that one. And of course, Peachtree Corners Life, we've just had a slew of candidates that we've spoken to, so you know that primary's coming up July, I think it's July 24th, if I'm correct, on that Tuesday. So if you're looking to find out a little bit more about some of the runoff candidates, especially some of the Superior Court judge candidates that I've interviewed, feel free to check my podcast out, and you can find a little bit more about those people. And if you have suggestions for a show, guests, or an idea for a topic, I'd love to hear it. Let me know about that. And we have a new sponsor that's coming on board, and I'll share that with you next month. This is going to be a great fall, and I appreciate you guys joining us. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Thanks.
With over 12,500 feet of open, collaborative workspaces, a design and development lab with 3D printers, and a podcast studio, Peachtree Corners Tech Incubator, Prototype Prime, offers hardware and software technology startups a place to grow. Funded by the City of Peachtree Corners, Prototype Prime's mission is to provide early-stage startup teams with the support they need to launch and scale. Start up your passion at Prototype Prime. Visit prototypeprime.com or at Prototype Prime on social media.